great way to learn about insights for your products, services, or ideas, or even how to better brand that product you're putting together, is by conducting qualitative research. Qualitative research are words, people's words. Of course, in any survey, you could ask one or more open-ended questions. Those are questions that you're not asking for a specific answer to, where you've provided categories or want them to fill in a number or check one or several boxes. This sort of technique. Instead, it's called an open-ended question, where you want them to say, type, or share their thoughts and feelings some way. While that's always possible, the two biggest types of qualitative research out there are either one-on-one interviews or focus groups, and that's what we want to talk about today. One-on-one interviews are just like they sound. It's the researcher who asks the question, gets together in a one-on-one situation, maybe a small group, but usually a one-on-one situation, to talk with whoever the subject is, the person they want information from. And so that could happen in somebody's office, it could happen online, it could happen in a phone conversation. That's not so important. What's important is it's more or less one person talking in detail with the other person. And so what the approach is typically they will start with an open-ended question, and then they will be able to ask follow-up questions. Well, give me an example of that, or how long has that been going on, or what's been happening. So it's a way to have a dialogue or a conversation and get more in depth than just a straight yes, no, or which of these categories best describe your situation. Doing one-on-one interviews, what you want to do is take sparse notes while you're going through it. You may be able to type those on a computer or a laptop, but if you're face-to-face with someone, actually I think it's better to use paper, write keywords or key phrases as you go through so you can remember the gist of what they're saying. Try to make that as non-distracting as possible. Again, you're more interested in what is the person saying, why are they saying it, what's their background, and so forth. And these are great interviews for employees, executive interviews, key client interviews. There's all sorts of techniques you could use these. Now, one very important point is to realize when the interview is over. A lot of times people think the interview is just that little bit of time between when you've started asking questions and when you wrap up. But frankly, some of the best information comes when the interview is technically over. You're walking towards the door, you're walking through the plant or whatever you're doing, and you get additional insights. Those are very, very powerful, and that happens all of the time. And so once that interview is finished, as quickly as possible, you want to go back and fill in your notes. Data, especially qualitative data, has a half-life. And by that I mean, whatever you remember today, great. By tomorrow, the next day, next week, you're going to remember a fraction of what was said. So you take your notes and you immediately go through there and fill out and add any details. If you're going to write a summary of what happened in the one or more interviews you're doing, the sooner you write that summary, the better it's going to be than if you wait several days. Again, you'll forget too much of it. When you're taking those notes, remember to focus on themes. Once in a while, you might want to write down a verbatim comment, but that's less important in my view. You're really after the themes. You don't want to write every word and make it sound like you're doing dictation. Instead, you're looking for themes. Focus on that. Using one-on-one interviews for an image and reputation audit of a firm that provides litigation support, here are some sample questions that I was able to use in talking with some of their key customers. Their key customers were attorneys. And so attorneys in general are a very sophisticated audience. You can ask a relatively complex question, and most of them can provide a very specific and interesting answer. If you're going to ask open-ended questions of a more focused or limited audience, maybe a little less educated, you'll have to be more precise in your questions, but here you can get away with a lot. So after you explain what the purpose of the interview was, here's some examples of open-ended questions. Number one, what are your overall opinions of the company? That's a great question because they can take it anywhere they want. And whatever they start coming up with, you just ask follow-up questions. Well, give me an example of that. How long's that been going on? What else do you think? Where did you come up with that idea? What led you to this conclusion? Those are all follow-up questions that allow them to keep talking. Let's look at a second. Beyond the general image and reputation types of questions or a category like that, you could also ask about competitors. For example, who do you think the company's key competitors are? Why would you expect them to be competitors? Have you worked with them? What's different between working with them versus working with this particular firm? Those are all great ways to find information about who they feel they're competing with. A second big area of qualitative research are focus groups. And these are a wonderful technique for learning about customers, what they think, what's important to them. And the beautiful part about this is when you're running a focus group, you can not only talk with them in depth, you can have a conversation of several people playing off of each other, and you can do other things like show them sample materials, or here's what a potential product might look like, or here's how it's organized. Or you could show them potential advertisements or marketing material and get their opinions about them. Now in a focus group, you can certainly have quantification. Many times if I'm having 3 or 4 different ads that they're rating, I could have a quantitative sheet that rates 4 or 5 items on a 1 to 5. What do they think about it? Would they pay attention to it? These sorts of questions. There's no law that says you can't use quantification in a focus group, but the main thing is that you're getting feedback from this group of people together, and it's a very interesting dynamic. So what is a focus group really? It's an organized discussion with typically 8, 10, 12, 14 people around a table and a moderator. And if you're in a formal focus group setting at a facility, behind the moderator will be a one-way mirror. And the observers who will be in the room behind you will be watching through the glass and listening over the speaker. And they may have staged seating, so there's a level and a second level, so it's easy for them to see and so forth. And so they can listen directly to what people are saying and why they're saying it. The one thing to be careful with focus groups is that they are not projectable. What does that mean? You're only talking to 8 or 10 people in one group. Let's say you had 3 or 4, maybe 40, 50 people. That's not really a statistical representation of your audience. For some things, you're going to want a bigger survey. So a lot of firms will either start with a survey, find out what the trends are, and then run a focus group to find out what messaging might work, so on and so forth. Or they'll flip it the other way. They'll do focus groups, find out some trends, put it together in a survey, and go out and further validate it. You don't have to do both of those every time, but just be careful that you're talking more about a limited group of people based on who was there and what their thoughts are. Again, many organizations use these to gather great insights. Focus groups usually work very well for consumer audiences, where you've got a lot of people that you could choose from, and you could get them into a central facility, or you could do something through Zoom or some other video conferencing service where you're able to get them there at the same time. Where they don't work so well is when you have audiences who value their time more than money. In a typical focus group, you might pay $100 to $150 to a consumer for an hour and a half's meeting. In executives, let's say you were going to have a group of those, well, $150 might mean nothing to them, and it'd be very, very difficult to get a focus group. One-on-one interviews or something like that might be way more efficient and a better use of your time. With a technical audience or physicians, you might be paying $500 or $1,000 for that hour of time. So one of the things I've done a lot of over the years is run focus groups at conferences. So you might have a meeting in a particular city where a bunch of people are going to be there, and so you host a lunch or a breakfast, and you have a whole bunch of nice food, and you invite several people to come, and over the lunch hour, you're able to run the focus group and get their opinions. They've already paid to be there, they're in that location. So be very, very careful. A focus group only works, especially in-person ones, if you can get them in the room. If you're going to use video, then it's not as restricting, but there are pluses or minuses to both of those. If you've never been to a focus group, here's a little diagram of what it might look like. In the participant room, we would have a table, typically chairs around the table, the moderator's on one side, and then their back is to the wall or the camera. One of the things I do is run a lot of what I call mobile focus groups. Through video cameras and TVs and so forth, we're able to run a live focus group, but we just rent 2 hotel rooms near or next to each other. We have a video feed that goes from one room where the participants are to the observer room, so they can watch and talk and have a meeting back there while the other group is going on. It's a very nice technique, especially if you have a client or you're doing research in places where they don't have focus group facilities. So a lot of the work might be a hospital or a group or a factory or something that's in some smaller town or remoter area. Those are all, or more remote area, those are all things that would be good for using the video type conference. In the observer room, you can see that they are also a conference table, and there are people seated around the conference table, usually a TV. And so we have a way for them to watch. Now, what happens in a lot of focus group meetings, and I always tell my staff this, is these people are here to help you, and so being as respectful and as courteous as you can to your participants is key. But unfortunately, what happens in the viewer room is some of the observers they don't like what they're hearing, or they go off on a tangent, or they start talking loudly. And sometimes, even unfortunately, they start talking badly about some of the participants. Oh, I don't like what they had to say, or they're so ignorant, or whatever the comments are. And I would say, as a professional, whether you're observing as part of a team, or you're working with a client or another organization that you're helping run the focus group with, don't ever participate in that. Take the high road and realize how important it is that these people are there and they've actually showed up and you're ready to go with them. Now, if you want to run focus groups with like employees or other groups, you can certainly do that. You don't have to videotape everything. In those situations, maybe you have a colleague that has a laptop and they're going to take notes as you go through. The nice part about the video is that it's a way for you to kind of take notes about the particular group or topic that you're going through. So when you're running a focus group, there's several different things that you have to do. If you're not working with an outside firm, you've got to recruit the participants. And so having a little qualification survey and finding out some specific things about their background or whatever the criteria are, that's very important. And finding out, are they available those days, and scheduling and so forth. And that's really an awful lot of work. A lot of people downplay that, but that's very, very difficult to get people to show up to a focus group. So what we end up doing is often trying to recruit 2 or 3 more people than we actually expect to show, because last minute someone cancels or something like that. So that's a very important step. The other step before the group is to come up with your questions. And we usually put that together in what's called a discussion or a moderator's guide. And what we're looking for in every survey, in every project, but especially in moderators' guides, is to use something I call the funnel technique. And that's where we go from general questions to more specific questions. And we also have kind of categories or timestamps, the amount of time generally we think we want to spend on a topic or an area. And even though you might not ask every question in the moderator's guide, and some of the questions would change, what you're doing is you and your client or your team are getting on the same page about generally the types of questions and information that you want from participants. Now, if you do everything correctly, then again, it's more of a guide. You'll ask a question, 2 or 3 follow-ups, whatever. You'll have enough information. In the end, you can write a very thorough report and come up with good takeaways and insights based on what everyone was saying. Let's take an example look at some of the questions you might include in a moderator's guide. First of all, there's an introduction. Some of the things I like to say is it's a chance to talk about ideas and opinions. There's no right or wrong answers. I ask people if they've ever been to a focus group. If not, I explain very quickly what it is, these sorts of things. And one of the ways I like to tell people that they should just be themselves and not try to come up with the correct answer, but I just want to hear whatever answer they have, is this. I say, hey, I'm going to throw out a topic. And I've got a laundry list of questions here. I'll throw out a topic. And then I become a hockey referee. And so what's going to happen is if you agree or disagree, that's fine. One of the other things we're going to see is if you're out there and you're talking, you don't let anybody else talk, then we're going to take a minute and we're going to put you in the penalty box and we're going to get somebody else on the ice and let them skate around. A lot of people, at least in Western cultures, understand hockey, have a general idea of what's going on, and they know, oh, okay, we kind of have a process that we use. And then during the groups, if somebody is talking a lot, I say, hey, wait a minute, it's time you got to go to the penalty box for a couple minutes, and they get a little laugh about it. So those are great ways to set up the introduction. Then I want to think of my next most general topic area. And in this particular example, it was as part of the introduction, you're also going to want to have everybody introduce themselves. And so what I like to do is ask people, would they introduce themselves to the rest of the group, tell us a little bit about who they are, what do they do, what's their family situation like, or whatever the topic is. And then I often ask this question, tell me something that is interesting or unusual about you. Do you have a fun fact, a hobby? And I set that up. And so you learn a lot of things very quickly about people. And so in 10 minutes or so, we can go around the group, everybody's introduced themselves, and they're warmed up enough that we can start talking about more serious topics for our particular group. Once the introductions are done, I might start with what's their awareness of a particular topic, or how often did they do something. In some situations, you might get a quick show of hands. How many people do this? Okay, how many people are for an idea or against it? Not that I'm necessarily counting those as some exact quantification. I'm just trying to get a trend of where are most of the people at. And here's an example from a focus group that was run with high net worth individuals, people make a lot of money, and it was for a foundation. So what they do is they set up, for tax purposes and charitable purposes, a trust, and then that money's invested, and the proceeds from that investment are used to support nonprofits or other organizations. And so this foundation wanted to know, what do investors know about them? What do they think? What should they be doing differently? So on and so forth. So here's a couple questions. What do you think about this company? What's your overall understanding of the organization? Again, that's pretty broad. It's starting out, and they can start to answer that, what they know about it, what are the service lines, these sort of things. So one of the first questions we wanted to ask was, what is your understanding of the organization? If you think about that for a moment, that's pretty broad. It allows the client to figure out, do they know anything about the organization? Do they know all the different services, the different categories where they focus? So that's pretty broad. That's a good way to get started. Then we would ask something about, what do you see as the strengths of the organization? What are the weaknesses? What are its challenges? What should it be doing differently in the future? Those are all big picture ideas that, with a sophisticated group like high net worth individuals or donors, they will talk at length about these particular topics. Then, depending on the group, what I like to do is end with the creative section. Those might be advertisements that I would play, or storyboards of potential advertisements or concepts or something like that. And when you bring one of those topics up, you ask people, have they ever heard about that? What do they think the message is? That's a very important question. Do they believe it? Is it persuasive? What would they change, if anything, about it? And so pretty quickly you can get an idea. Now let's say you've had 2 or 3 different possible campaigns, one look, a second look, a third look. What I like to do in the end then is sort those and pick a winner, because at the end of the day, every organization has to market something. Even though the people in the groups might not love everything about it, we've got to pick a winner. So what I would do then is bring out the 3 or 4 different campaigns. Maybe there's a storyboard about each one, put them up on the wall or have them around the table and say, hey, of these, how many people think this was the best campaign? Maybe quick show of hands. Why? Why not? How about this one now? And through this sorting technique, you can pretty quickly get to a winner where there's either 1 or maybe 2 max that were more favorably viewed and thought about than the others. Then the results from the focus groups would be used by the creative advertising agencies and others to further refine what they're going to do, and then they would go to market with that strategy. A couple examples from focus groups that I think are pretty interesting. Here's one we did for a Major League Baseball team called the Pittsburgh Pirates. And they wanted to develop a new team logo and uniforms. And so the approach was to have focus groups with students, grade school, middle school, and high school students. Because although the parents typically pay for their clothes, one of the trends from other research they found was that students are very likely to be wearing sports-related merchandise, clothing. And so if it looked good on the students, or if they liked it, then it would probably sell with the other audiences. So what we did was we had 3 nights of focus groups, 2 each night. So there was the grade school, the middle school, and the high school. And what they did was come up with a logo. This is the current logo for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And each element of the logo was tested. For example, the lettering, there were 3 or 4 different types of lettering. This one won, so it's a composite logo. Notice in the back, those are called cross bats, like crossbones you might see on a pirate ship or a logo of some kind. They like that. What about the bandana? We tested different colors. We had the black polka dot, the white polka dot. In this case, the black polka dot won. The white polka dot, a lot of the kids thought that that made the pirate look like a sissy. And so that wasn't very good. What about the beard? We had long beards, short beards. They liked this beard where it was trimmed up a little bit. Earring was okay. And one of the things in the earlier version was the pirate wasn't very mean, so they wanted the pirate to look meaner. So in this case, they had the pirate growl, arr, like it was biting part of its lip. Now, the client at the time really wanted a skull. Instead of an actual person on the bat, they wanted a skull to be the winner. And what happened was that scared a lot of the kids in grade school. They would look at that and they'd say, "Sir, I don't like that. It's frightening to me." And so what they ended up doing was they made that an alternative logo. You can still go to the gift shop or buy it online, but it's not the main logo that the Pirates were using. We also had uniforms. And I had them on mannequins with a sheet, a white sheet over them. And so when it was time to look at a uniform, I'd bring out the mannequin, rip off the sheet, and look at their reaction. And one of them was a dark black jersey with red, which is very different look for the Pirates from where they were. And in every group, the kids started making noises like, ooh, ah, yeah, I love that. Why? Because whatever the design was really resonating with them. But also in most of the groups, one of the things that happened, a student would raise their hand and say, I don't like that logo. And I'd say, what were you just all excited about for then? They'd say, because what ends up happening is that logo scares me a little bit, or that shirt scares me. What's happening is black. The players are going to go out there and they're going to be hot. If they're hot, they won't play well. If they don't play well, they're going to lose. Well, that was pretty prophetic, because the Pirates ended up losing for a number of years after they came out with these new logos. And I don't know if it was because the shirts were too hot or they had the wrong team out there or whatever. But the organization won, and they won big time with this new logo. The year this was rolled out, it was the #1 merchandise seller in all of Major League Baseball. Think about that a minute. They made millions of dollars in merchandise sales with 6 focus groups and a composite logo. If they had sat around the table and had a debate internally, they would have been way off track, and it would not have been nearly as successful as getting your target audience in front of you, showing some different alternatives, and then picking a winner. Another example is with the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is a hockey team here in Pittsburgh, and they had a new owner come in, and they wanted to make a new logo. And so at the time, the one on the bottom left corner was their current logo. It was developed by a graphic arts firm. Surprisingly, it's now a retro logo that's come out recently, and they've reissued it. But they were going to test some other logos, and so there were 3 new ones on here. If you looked at them, we got some feedback, and here's what we learned. If we looked at the one on the top left, a lot of people thought, well, what is that, Darth Vader or Star Wars? What's that? Well, too many copyright and franchise issues there, so that one crashed and burned. Over on the right side, they looked at that logo and they said, oh, that's the National Aviary or the Baltimore Ravens. It looked too much like other existing logos. And then finally, that one on the bottom right, the skating penguin with the steroid-induced muscles and a tiny beak, we more or less put that on there as a control item. We didn't think that would win. Surprisingly, that one did very, very well in the groups. And when I asked, why do you like that logo so much? People said, well, when I was a kid, there was this skating penguin and it was this great logo. What did the Penguins do? They went back to their archives and pulled out the old-time logo from many years ago, and they used it. So it was basically one of the first teams to go retro. And so what you're seeing now all over the place is with all these sports teams, they'll have logos throughout their history that they'll either go back to or have on special jerseys and this sort of thing. And that's essentially what the Penguins did at the time. Once again, very, very successful, iconic image. And they did it with, in this case, 2 focus groups, one with season ticket holders and one with people that had purchased a single game ticket. So a very efficient way to get some great insights and usage out of their logo. Here's another example that was done for a tanning company. If you're not familiar with a tanning, what it is people, typically women, will go to tanning booths. This company's differentiator where it says stand-up tanning, so they take all their clothes off in the booth, put on a pair of goggles that protects their eyes, and then get baked for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it's going to be. And a lot of people think, oh, well, you just need tanning just to look a little darker or so on and so forth. But what actually happens is that a lot of people tan before they go on vacation or before they're getting ready for a wedding or something like this. So it's a very interesting market. And so through the focus groups, we were trying to figure out what was the best way to convince people to do tanning. And in the end part of the group, when we're testing some of the messages, here's what we came up with. There are three different boards up here at the top. When you look at them, you think, well, which one won? Well, actually, it's the one in the middle with the white background around there. And when we ask, why does that one look so much better than these other ones? And people said, because it looks like the product is working. That person looks like they have a good tan. So that image of the three won. We also tested a couple potential videos or storyboards. And one storyboard was more or less about the process of tanning, how it worked, and the other was about all of the things that the tanned, in this case, woman did. She was out with her friends, having a good time, partying, so on and so forth. As you might expect, the storyboard that showed her out with her friends did much better than the actual technique of how they went about tanning or what the process was, that sort of thing, because it was the benefit that she got from the tan. And so those were used to develop their marketing campaigns with the input from current and potential consumers. One great question I like to ask in focus groups is what I call personification question. And for that Hollywood Tans, I ask it in this one as well. I said, if Hollywood Tans was a person, would it be a man or a woman? How old would it be? What kind of car would it drive? What kind of restaurants would it eat in? All of these sorts of things. And at the time, what did people do? They basically personified an actress called Reese Witherspoon. Even though Hollywood Tans, to customers, they saw as somebody wholesome and positive and very well put together. To non-customers, they didn't have such a wholesome image. They thought of more of an actress or another star, and maybe they didn't have the strongest morals and all this sort of thing. They had more of a negative image with the actual title of the organization. And so it's very interesting that personification technique or question helped that come out very quickly and very clearly. As a final example with focus groups, here's one from a major health care provider. This one's called UPMC, or University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And what they were trying to do is they had a big insurance battle going on at the time, and they wanted to make sure that people understood you had to have a specific type of insurance to get what they called in-network coverage, so you didn't have to pay a bunch of extra or a bunch of out-of-pocket. And so they were looking at two potential types of campaigns. One was about a shark in half a cage, and the other was about the bees, a beekeeper that didn't have the proper clothing on. And so the idea was, why would you go down in the ocean in a shark tank with your legs hanging out and so forth? And so let's take a listen to the actual voiceovers for this. Here was the image and what the voiceover said. 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 Now, let's take a look at what some of the people reacted to who were in the focus groups at the time. Reacted to who were in the focus groups at the time. Reacted to who were in the focus groups at the time. Reacted to who were in the focus groups at the time. Reacted to who were in the focus groups at the time. Reacted to who were in the focus groups at the time. Reacted to who were in the focus groups at the time. Reacted to who were in the focus groups at the time. You can see This really did not resonate well with people. They thought it was outside the character for healthcare. It didn't seem like it fit. There was a lot of problems with these particular ads. And the next day, my client called me and thanked me for saving him and his organization nearly $1 million. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, from the focus groups, we decided we're not going to develop either one of these ads because it's too controversial. And so we would have paid for production and done all of this, and we would have wasted a lot of money and just fired everybody up. So sometimes you're running or testing these ads to save money, not necessarily pick which one's going to be a winner. So as you can see, qualitative research can be very, very powerful and give you a lot of great insights and help you be very successful, whether you're doing a product development and getting that feedback, or figuring out what your brand is, or your marketing messages, or any of those. And remember, that can be one-on-one interviews, maybe small group, but definitely one-on-one interviews and focus groups. Those are your two biggest techniques that have proven themselves again and again and again. So use one of those to help figure out what the words mean.